They will come in the evening, just as the sun is setting. They'll look like regular kids at first glance, but when you look closer, something just seems off. Other children can make a lot of noise. They're always running around and getting into something, but these kids are too quiet, too still. They seem to walk without moving the air around them. Maybe they don't make eye contact with you right away, and that makes sense because they're children. It's possible they're shy or even scared, and all they want to do is come inside to watch the television or have a snack. You know it's a bad idea, and you briefly ask yourself, where are their parents? But as they keep repeating their request, please let us in, over and over again, you begin to feel yourself giving in. But then they do shift their eyes up towards you, and in that instant you realize why the hair on the back of your neck is standing straight up the whole time. Their eyes are pure black. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and happy Harloween. The concept of black-eyed children, or BEKs, is widely believed to be an urban legend, like Slender Man or Jeff the Killer. But urban legends, like any other type of legends or folklore, they don't appear out of thin air. They have to come from somewhere, and some of them even end up being true. For instance, in 2015, a 500-year-old series of tunnels were discovered under the Mexican city of Puebla. The underground tunnel system dates back to the year 1531, and for generations, parents and grandparents in Mexico would enthrall children with tales of these mythical secret tunnels beneath their feet, where the bones of giants could be found. But until 2015, those tunnels were considered widely to be an urban legend, a myth, not real. This month, I might have an entire video for you dedicated to an enduring urban legend that has its roots in reality. But the point is, these urban legends, they rise up from something real that someone saw or experienced, and the stories build momentum and gain added texture and details as they're passed along through space and time. And it's a bit menacing to think about what experiences could have led to the birth of the whole black-eyed children urban legend. And I would only explore this thought in broad daylight. But it is interesting to wonder if the black-eyed children are even an urban legend at all. Maybe there's more truth to them than we want to believe. And full disclosure, I started researching this during the day in a public place, and I still ended up being terrified, really creeped out to the point of feeling almost panicked. So take whatever precautions you need, turn on some lights, get under the blankets, and let's dive in. But before we do, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, GlassesUSA.com. By cutting out the middleman, GlassesUSA.com offers over 9,000 prescription glasses and sunglasses, including in-house brands like Muse and Amelia E, and designer brands like Ray-Ban, Oakley, Gucci, and many more, all at up to 70% off retail prices. You can shop for all your eyewear needs online at affordable prices, starting at only $30 with basic prescription lenses included without leaving your home. And right off the top, I want to tell you that I've been getting my glasses from GlassesUSA.com long before they started sponsoring my YouTube videos. I really only take on sponsors that I can talk about passionately and genuinely. So with Glasses USA, it was a no-brainer. I've thought about getting LASIK over the years because I am really, I have really bad vision. I'm blind. Without my glasses, it's bad. It's bad news bears. But I've worn glasses since I was 18 months old, and honestly, I just can't see myself without them. And a lot of you also say you don't even recognize me when I don't have my glasses on. And that means I want to have a lot of glasses to choose from so that I can complement my outfits or, my mood, and I can switch it up. I don't get bored. That means I cannot be going to the glasses store every time I feel the need for a new pair of glasses because every trip is not only time-consuming but expensive. GlassesUSA.com solved those problems for me. They can solve them for you. And every pair of glasses I own, I've gotten from GlassesUSA.com. Let me address the question that a lot of people have when shopping for glasses online. They're worried the glasses won't look good on their face once they get them. They don't like going to the glasses store, but at least there they can try them on in person. You don't need to try them on in person. And GlassesUSA.com has several tools that make the whole process easier and give you the ability to choose the right pair of frames for your face shape and needs. They have a virtual try-on tool on their website. You can just upload a picture of yourself or take a picture of yourself right in that virtual try-on tool, and then you can try on as many pair of frames as you want, and you can take as long as you want. You don't feel rushed because you're in a store and there's people waiting, or there's all these people milling around, or you got your kids with you. It is the most fun part of shopping for glasses, trying them all on. And doing it on glassesusa.com takes away the stress of having to try these on in a glasses store while everyone stares at you and you don't even know how many faces those frames were on before because you know they're not getting wiped down after each try-on. In the age of COVID, no thank you. Glassesusa.com also has a short quiz which only takes a minute, and it will suggest the right pair of glasses based on your face shape and what you're looking for, and then you can kind of shop within that range. And glassesusa.com has a prescription scanner app. If you don't have your current prescription handy, you can use glassesusa.com's free app. It's easy, takes under 10 minutes, and when you're done, you can start shopping for glasses right away, which is the fun part. And once you start doing that, you'll realize the possibilities are endless. You all know that I usually lean towards the more oversized frames, like these ones that I'm wearing right now. These are the Muse Marlene in blue and tortoise shell, but I'm also a huge VR player, so virtual reality, and you have to put those like things on, and I cannot be accurately playing VR without glasses, and you can't wear big glasses when you're also wearing the VR goggles. So I also need a smaller pair. And I love these Ray-Ban 5169s in tortoise and green. I love that they're kind of darker on the outside, but then inside there's this little shot of green, which is really cool and pretty. Green's my favorite color. I also love these glasses for when I'm watching TV at night in bed because I can lay on my side without them giving me a headache because they're not big. Glasses wearers know exactly what I mean. I also have all my prescription sunglasses from glassesusa.com, and I'm so sad because my all-time favorite pair of sunglasses was stolen by the ocean when I was in the Bahamas last month. They were there 1 second, gone the next. Here's a picture of me wearing them right before they got stolen by the ocean. How cute are they? And I swear, I walked into the waves. It was right when Hurricane Ian was brewing. The waves were strong. My glasses were on my face 1 second and gone the next. And I walked out of the water and I literally yelled to the gods, "This is why I don't go in the ocean." But I did order another pair of the exact same glasses through glassesusa.com again because they are the best. And I'm talking about the Ray-Ban Ericas. I had the blue frames, but they have all different colors, which are really cool. The black ones with the purple frames are next on my list. Those are sweet looking. Everything about the experience with glassesusa.com from start to finish is always amazing. And if you want to get some new glasses or sunglasses, you should definitely check them out. I love them. My family is a family of glasses wearers. My husband, myself, all 3 kids, we all wear glasses, and that can get pricey and stressful, but glassesusa.com has made it fun, easy, and so much more affordable. So I've linked all the glasses that I talked about in today's video in the description box. You can order them. You can get them shipped for free. If you don't like your new glasses, you can get 100% of your money back within 14 days of delivery, no questions asked. And glassesusa.com offers a 365-day product warranty, so it really is a risk-free shopping experience. You have nothing to lose besides the stress and cost of traditional glasses shopping in the store. Thank you so much to glassesusa.com for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. The first modern documented case of black-eyed children comes from Abilene, Texas in 1996. However, throughout history, there have been many mentions of entities with black eyes. We'll talk about that a little bit later in this video. And there's been incidences of people seeing black-eyed children that go back all the way to the 1930s. But the experience of journalist Brian Bethel brought the idea of black-eyed children to the forefront of modern culture because, you know, the internet. So that is where we will start with Brian Bethel. And keep in mind, Brian is a typical normal kind of person, you know. He's worked at the Abilene Reporter News for 27 years. He isn't out there writing books or seeking notoriety or money from this very jarring experience. You may say that this didn't happen to him, but I can say confidently that he definitely believes it did. Essentially, he would have nothing to benefit from fabricating this story, and as far as I can tell, he has not benefited. In fact, Brian Bethel hasn't really wanted to talk much about what happened to him on that night so many years ago because he wants to forget it. And this is very common amongst people who have had encounters with black-eyed children. They have been terrified by it, and then they really don't want to talk about it, and they just want to forget it. But they can't forget it. So it was between 9:30 and 10 o'clock at night. Brian Bethel was sitting in his car outside of Camelot Communications, and this was one of Abilene's early internet service providers located on North First Street near a movie theater. So he was there to pay his bill using the night drop slot, and he was filling out a check to the cable company or the internet service provider company using the light of the movie theater's marquee. So he's writing this check, and all of a sudden, he hears a sharp rap on the window of his car, and it caused him to jump and look up. And outside of his car window, he saw two young boys that he thought were between the ages of 9 and 12. One of the boys was olive-skinned with curly dark hair. The other boy was pale and freckled with red hair, but they were both wearing dark-colored hooded sweatshirts. And the olive-skinned, dark-haired boy was standing a little bit in front of the red-haired boy. And you'll see that this is another feature of the black-eyed children that's very common. There's usually two or more, and one always seems to be standing ahead of the others, almost as the spokesperson, the leader, and usually the only one that speaks. When Brian Bethel saw these two boys standing outside of his window, he said, quote, "I was immediately gripped by an incomprehensible, soul-racking fear. I had no idea why," end quote. But of course, grown adults are going to feel silly for being afraid of little children or for feeling fear when they see little children. They're going to write off their unsettled feeling as just a residual shock from being startled by, a knock on your window or a knock on your door, startled by two children suddenly appearing in the dark outside of your car window. Brian Bethel rolled down his window to see what the two boys wanted, and the dark-haired boy, he started speaking, and he told Brian Bethel that they wanted to see the movie Mortal Kombat, but they'd left their money at their mother's house, and could he give them a ride home so that they could get the money and see the movie? Now, Brian said that the boy spoke in a very polite, almost old-fashioned way, but when Brian didn't immediately respond to the request, because it was a strange one, the boy grew insistent and stated in a mechanical voice,
"Come on, mister, let us in. We can't get in your car until you let us in. We're just little boys. Let us in, and we'll be gone before you know it."
Brian felt silly, but he was actually really afraid of these children. He said, quote, "I had no reason to be frightened of these two boys, but I was terribly," end quote. Brian looked up at the marquee and he saw that the last Mortal Kombat show of the night had already started. And by the time he took the boys anywhere and brought them back, the movie would be over or close to being over. As he pondered this, the dark-haired boy kept talking, offering assurances.
"It won't take long. Let us in. We don't have a gun or anything."
As the measured, almost hypnotizing voice of the child went on, Brian felt his hand move towards the lock on his car door. But then something changed, and he said his mind exploded in a vortex of all-consuming terror. Brian said that when he looked from the marquee back to the boys, he saw that they were still staring at him, but now he realized that their eyes were jet black. Quote, "The sort of eyes one sees these days on aliens or bargain basement vampires on late-night television, soulless orbs like two great swaths of starless night," end quote. Brian said he panicked, and he tried to act normally, making an excuse of why he could not give the boys a ride, and then he slammed his car into reverse and started to drive away. But the dark-haired boy, who had done all of the talking, he suddenly grew angry when he realized Brian was leaving, and he began banging on the car window as Brian rolled it up, speaking louder and saying angrily,
"Let us in. We can't come in unless you tell us to."
As Brian Bethel tore out of the parking lot, he glanced in the rearview mirror, almost expecting the boys to be chasing after him. But they were gone, vanished in a split second and into thin air. Now, Brian's description of these two boys is very similar to how others have described black-eyed children in their own encounters. The children are usually in pairs or groups, but they can be alone. They often have pale white skin, but some witnesses have described them as having olive-toned skin, cool-toned skin, almost blue or green, while others have claimed the children had unnaturally colored skin, as if they'd used some fake tanning solution. They usually appear at night when you're alone. In Brian Bethel's case, he was in his car, but many others have received visits from black-eyed children when they were in the place they felt the most safe, their own homes, which was the case with Paul, the prison guard. Paul had just gotten home from his shift at a Midwest prison, and in a rare occasion, he had the house to himself because his wife and young son were out of town. He changed out of his prison uniform, he made a sandwich, anticipating a relaxing night of watching sports before heading to bed for the evening. As Paul stood in the kitchen slathering mustard on bread, he heard a knock on the front door of his house. And Paul would later tell author David Weatherly, quote, "At first, I wasn't even sure it was a knock. It was kind of soft and continuous, and I thought maybe it was just some other noise from outside. I kept making my food and ignored it for a few minutes. Then it got louder." End quote. As is often the case with black-eyed children, the signal of their visit will come in the form of a knock. Even if your home has a doorbell, they will never use it. They will always knock. Paul walked to the door and saw, even before he opened it, that there were two young boys standing on the front porch. He believed they were between 12 and 14 years of age, and they were both wearing dark-colored hoodies and jeans. Paul went to open the door, but he paused for a moment because he knew all the local kids in his neighborhood, and he didn't recognize these two kids, and it was nighttime, so he wasn't sure why they would be out, walking around the neighborhood if they didn't live nearby. And Paul knew that his own son was much younger than these two boys, so they couldn't have been his son's friends or playmates. So Paul opened the door, but the two boys didn't immediately react to the door opening. Paul said, quote, "I thought something was odd about the scene, and neither child said anything. When I opened the door, they just stood there with their heads down, like you do in the rain, but it wasn't raining." End quote. Maybe they were Boy Scouts selling magazine subscriptions or something, so Paul asked what he could do for them. And one boy who was standing a bit in front of the other boy, he raised his head and smiled, responding,
"Hey, we just wanted to stop in for a bit."
Obviously, Paul felt this was a strange response, considering he didn't know these two boys. Paul told the boys that they must have had the wrong house, and the lead boy responded as if Paul had not spoken at all, or as if he hadn't heard or understood the meaning of what Paul was saying. The boy said,
"Oh well, it's getting kind of late. Can we come in for a bit?"
Now, the closest example I can think of to explain what this is like when black-eyed children speak is if you're on the phone with customer service for a company and you get a robot and you're trying to communicate with this stupid robot what you want, but the robot customer service rep is basically ignoring you because, let's be honest, the robot customer service rep does not care what you want, and that's why most of these companies have these AI customer service representatives because, a real person would have to actually help you, but the robot can just pretend it doesn't understand what you're saying. So you're talking to this AI customer service rep, and you might say that you want to speak to a representative, and the robotic voice might reply, "Okay, you want more information about our return policy." And then you yell, "No, representative, give me a person, I want to talk to somebody." And the voice responds, "Okay, you want to upgrade your payment method. Is that right?" Many people give this same description of the black-eyed kids. It's as if they're reading off a script, and it doesn't matter what you say or how you respond or how agitated or scared you get, they will only be able to say the words in their script. Now, Paul was thoroughly disturbed by now, and he remembered, quote, "Something was causing the hair on the back of my neck to go up. I felt like this kid was ignoring me and focusing on me at the same time. It just made no sense. Why the hell would a couple of kids show up at a stranger's door and want to come in?" End quote. But it was at this moment, in the glow of the porch light, that Paul saw the eyes of the boys, and he saw that they were pitch black. And as Paul tried to make sense of that, the lead boy spoke again.
"It would be good if you just let us come in now. You don't have to think about it. Just open the door and ask us in."
The best way that Paul could describe his reaction was fight or flight, the physiological reaction that occurs when a person is in the presence of something mentally or physically terrifying. Fight or flight refers to the two options that our ancient ancestors had to choose from when faced with something like a dangerous predator. They would either stand their ground and fight it out, or run away. And even though Paul was a grown man, a prison guard who dealt with violent criminals every day in his job, and he was now only facing two little boys, his brain was screaming at him to run away. And he yelled, "Get off my porch," and slammed the door, locked the door, and locked the deadbolt. And then he sagged against the barricaded door in relief. But this relief did not last long, because as he tried to catch his breath, another series of raps came at the door, slow and soft at first, growing heavier and more insistent. Paul realized that his eyes had been squeezed shut. He had his fist squeezed shut. He was just cowering against the door. And so he backed away from the door. He turned around and he looked out the glass side panel. And that's where he saw a pair of jet black eyes staring straight at him. And as soon as the boys knew that Paul had seen them, one of them slowly lifted his little hand, never breaking eye contact, and rapped on the glass of the door. Paul's flight response turned to a desire to fight, and he rushed to his bedroom. He grabbed his gun, and he returned to the front door. He flung it open. He went out on the porch, but the porch was empty. Paul was bewildered, and he later said, quote, "It was the weirdest thing. I knew it had only taken me a couple of minutes at the most to grab and load that pistol. I searched the front yard and the backyard, the driveway, the garage, and I even went up and down the street. There was no sign of those black-eyed boys anywhere." End quote. And later, of course, Paul would ask his son, "Hey, do you have two friends? They look like this, very dark eyes. They had on hoodies. They were at my door. Do you know these kids?" And his son was like, "No." And then Paul would ask around the neighborhood, "Hey, does anybody have sons that fit this description? Or did anybody else see these kids in the neighborhood that night? Maybe they were, hooligans just trying to scare people or cause trouble." Nobody else had seen them. Just like with Brian Bethel's experience, the black-eyed children are there one moment, demanding to be let in, and the next they are gone, as if they vanished like ghosts. A lot of people have this same kind of experience with black-eyed children. 1 second they're there, they look away, they get distracted, they look back, and these kids have completely vanished, but there's no place that they could have gone. For instance, with Brian Bethel, he was in the middle of a parking lot. He should have seen the kids still there as he pulled out of the parking lot, but he didn't. And Paul, he searched everywhere, right? He even went out in the streets. He was looking around. No black-eyed children. But Paul could never get his experience with these kids out of his mind. He looked for answers on the internet. He talked to friends. He even talked to priests. He got a security system for his home. But still, the black eyes of the children were implanted in his brain. He said, quote, "Sometimes I'll have dreams about them. I'll wake up in a sweat thinking there was a knock at the door. Then I'll realize it was a dream, and I was remembering that night. I don't think it will ever totally leave me." End quote. And Paul is not alone in not being able to shake his experience with the black-eyed kids. It's very similar to the symptoms of PTSD. Most people who claim to have seen them report being plagued by fear and the unanswered question of what might have happened if they'd given in to these eerie requests to come in. And only one family on record has any inkling of the answer to that question. What happens if the black-eyed kids get in? Sharon was a registered nurse in Iowa when she and her 8-year-old son stopped to pick up milk at a market on their way home. It was sort of a convenience store / gas station market thing, and it was early on a Sunday evening. The sun was just dipping below the horizon, and Sharon had just worked a long shift, so she only planned to run into the market quickly because she only had a couple items to grab. So she parked in front of the store, she left her son in the back seat of the SUV, she ran in, she grabbed a gallon of milk and a box of cereal, and she was back in the car within 3 to 4 minutes. But at that point, Sharon realized that she had suddenly picked up another passenger. A young boy was sitting next to her son in the back seat. And this wouldn't have been terribly alarming except for a few things. First of all, Sharon noted how strange it was, how close this boy was sitting to her son. These are 2 little boys in the back seat of an SUV, a huge back seat. But this new little boy was sitting so close to her son that their legs were touching. And secondly, the boy's eyes were pure black and shiny, like glossy marbles. Sharon immediately felt scared, and she didn't ask why she felt scared. She just reacted. She rushed out of the driver's seat. She threw the back door of the SUV open. She snatched her son off the seat, and she ran back into the convenience store where she informed the clerk that someone was inside of her car. The clerk obviously walked outside to the front of the store to address the issue. He found the SUV with its engine still running and both doors on the driver's side wide open, but there was no one in the car. The clerk offered to call the police for Sharon, but she felt silly. What was she going to tell a police officer? That a small child with black eyes was in her car and she was so terrified of this kid that she needed law enforcement? They would think she was overreacting or crazy. or both. Still, Sharon did not want to get back into that SUV. She could not forget the angry glare on the face of that black-eyed little boy when she'd grabbed her child off the seat next to him. So she called her husband, Tom, and she asked him to meet her at the convenience store, which was just a few minutes away from their home. Now, of course, Tom had questions. He was like, why does my wife want me to drive to this gas station convenience store and take her car home so she can take my car home? But he didn't ask those questions right away. He said that the grave tone of voice with which his wife spoke to him startled him. He could tell that she was really scared. So once Tom got there, Sharon explained to him very quickly what had happened, and she said, listen, I'm just feeling a little freaked out. I'm sure it's nothing, but it would just make me feel better if you would drive my SUV home, and then me and our son could take your truck home. Tom quickly agreed. He got his wife and son into his truck, and he sent them off. But before he followed, he went inside and spoke to the store clerk for a few minutes. When Tom finally slid into the driver's seat of Sharon's SUV, he gagged. He said there was a smell like rancid, dirty diapers permeating the entire vehicle, so he began checking under seats and in the side of the doors to find the culprit of the smell. He figured maybe somebody left a bag of fast food back here and it's rotting underneath the seat, or maybe there is actually a dirty diaper somewhere. But nothing was in the car that would be attributed to this horrible smell. Now, some people who have encountered black-eyed children also report the incident being accompanied by a foul smell, sometimes like sulfur, sometimes like hot garbage, but always terrible and always lingering long after the black-eyed children have vanished. While Tom was searching the SUV for dirty diapers, Sharon and her son had arrived home, and Sharon had some questions. Everything had been so hectic at the convenience store, she'd been unable to ask her son about the strange child that had been sitting so close to him in the back of her SUV. But now that things had calmed down and they were in the safety of their own home, Sharon felt it was time. She asked her son if he knew the boy from school or from the local playground, and her son responded that no, he didn't. This was the first day he had ever met this boy. Sharon asked her son what the boy wanted, and her son said, he just wanted to ride to our house. I thought we could play. Sharon asked her son, did this boy just get into the car without saying anything or without asking permission? And her son said, quote, oh no, Mommy, I asked him to get in. He said he wasn't allowed to unless I asked him, end quote. As Sharon was processing all of this, the phone rang. It was the hospital calling to let her know that her husband, Tom, had been in a terrible car accident on his way home from the convenience store. He had wrapped Sharon's SUV around a telephone pole, and the doctor now had to keep him for observation. When Tom was able to talk to his wife later, he said he was still thoroughly confused about how the accident had happened. It was like he didn't have a memory of it happening. He claimed that when he couldn't locate the source of the bad smell, he just rolled down the windows and started on the short drive home. He even speculated that maybe that horrible smell had possibly caused him to black out, leading to the car accident. But even that didn't make a lot of sense to Tom, because if it was a gas of some sort, the windows had been open, he'd rolled them all down because it smelled so bad, and he should have been fine to just drive the short distance home. But this family's tragedy was not over yet, because just a few days after Tom got home from the hospital, his son came down with a sickness, what looked like a cold, but nothing seemed to work to make his symptoms go away. And as the days went on, the little boy went from having the sniffles and a little headache to being very, very ill. Sharon and Tom brought their son to the doctor, who told them that the little boy hadn't had a cold after all, he had the flu. So the doctor sent Sharon and Tom and their son home with instructions that the boy should drink plenty of fluids and take Tylenol as needed for a fever. But a few days after that, the child was back in the doctor's office, this time showing no sign of the flu or a cold, but exhibiting symptoms of measles. However, the boy had been vaccinated against measles, and he wasn't testing positive for measles. The doctor was stumped, and he became even more confused as the next weeks passed, and Sharon and Tom's son went through a variety of symptoms, from high fevers to rashes, stomach aches, terrible headaches, blurred vision, and sores breaking out all over his body. Sharon and Tom eventually came to believe that Tom's car accident and their son's mystery illness were caused by their proximity to the black-eyed boy. Sharon had only been in that SUV for a split second. She got in, realized there was somebody that she didn't know in the car. She snatched her son out and ran in. So she'd been mainly unaffected. But her son had been sitting next to that little boy, very close to that little black-eyed boy, for at least 3 to 4 minutes. And Tom had been in the SUV with that terrible smell left behind after the black-eyed boy was gone for quite a while because he was searching for the source of the smell, and then he started driving home. Luckily, after being ill for several months, Sharon's son woke up one day. He was feeling better, and within no time he was completely healthy, but nobody ever was able to figure out what was wrong with him. Now, there are dozens of stories about brushes with these black-eyed children, and besides their eyes being black, most people agree on a few things. These children are usually between the ages of 6 and 16. They tend to be old-fashioned seeming. Now, many of them actually wear old-fashioned style clothes, but even those who are dressed in a more modern sweatshirt and jeans, those jeans and sweatshirts are still always dark-colored, never bright colors, and these kids still behave in a strangely formal and vintage way, their mannerisms, the way they speak. One witness described the speech patterns of black-eyed kids as overly proper but routine, like a computer telling you that you have mail. And the words and phrases that they use are so disconcerting because they're children, but they also seem to be pushy and even aggressive at times, the whole while trying to convince you that they are not a threat. Some people have described these kids as seeming almost Amish, and their clothing is ill-fitting and in need of a wash or mend, as if they're hand-me-downs. In his book, The Black-Eyed Children, David Weatherly gives the account of a man from Ohio who initially thought the black-eyed children that he encountered were homeless, saying, quote, "They looked grungy to me. I thought they had gotten those clothes from some shelter or out of the garbage because they didn't fit right. They also looked like they didn't eat much, but maybe that's because the clothes were so baggy. I've seen street kids before. The sad state of their clothes made me think about that." End quote. But all eyewitnesses agree that being in the presence of these children made them feel and react as if they were under a direct threat. And this presents a dichotomy in a human being. As adults, it's our natural instinct to protect children. This ensures that small human beings will be allowed to grow into big human beings and enable the human race to continue on. When faced with a child, that causes the same physiological reaction in you that an angry bear or a venomous snake elicits. It's confusing and unsettling. Your eyes see innocent children, but your brain, or perhaps something else like your sixth sense, your intuition, it screams at you that there's something dangerous beneath the surface. So what could these black-eyed children be? Beings from another planet, another dimension, something a bit more nefarious, evil? Let's talk about it. And we're going to start with my favorite theory, because many people believe that black-eyed children are the result of extraterrestrial experiments which have attempted to create alien-human hybrids. So basically, aliens are using humans to have babies that end up being half human, half alien. Up to 6% of Americans believe that they have been abducted by aliens, and many of those people have claimed to have been the subject of breeding experiments while they were abducted. And as crazy and off the wall as this sounds, a lot of people believe this theory. For instance, Young Hai Chi is a professor at Oxford University, and Professor David Jacobs, formerly of Temple University, who has written a book titled Walking Among Us: The Alien Plan to Control Humanity. Not everyone agrees on the reason these aliens are using humans to breed hybrids. Some think that the aliens have become unable to procreate on their own planet or plane for whatever reason. Some believe the aliens are creating a race of hybrids in response to global warming, so a race of humans/aliens who can adapt to the changing environment, while others see a more nefarious motive, which is world domination. Reportedly, these hybrids are already here and they've been living among us for decades, but the aliens are perfecting the hybrid, whereas in the early stages of these hybrids, they were, rough versions of hybrids. Maybe they couldn't survive. Maybe they looked more alien than human, so they wouldn't pass. If you watched, I think it was last season of American Horror Story, they do explore this theory in the last half of the season. So the first half of last season of American Horror Story was this sort of like vampire story where, it was a writer and he started taking these pills that made him like super smart, like the limitless pill, but also it came at a cost because he basically turned into like a blood-sucking, like vampire demon thing who has to kill people in order to keep up this talent that he has for writing now. But then the second half of the season went kind of back into like Roswell, New Mexico, and the Eisenhower era when everybody thought that aliens landed and the government covered it up. And it goes into this whole breeding experiment theory. And I think it does it very well. It was very interesting. Professor Young Hai Chi told NBC News, quote, "The first generation hybrids still have physical features distinctive to aliens, but from the second generation, they have almost indistinguishable bodily features from those of humans, although they may still carry at least 1/4 of alien genes," end quote. So basically the whole point is that these alien hybrids would resemble humans enough where they would be able to walk among us. And once again, the reason that they're doing this, some people believe world domination. Some people believe they're just like friendly, trying to help us. I don't think that they would be doing that because then why wouldn't they just show themselves? But yeah, world domination sounds about right. So the question is, are the black-eyed children the result of early breeding experiments where they resemble humanoids but still have the distinctive saucer-like and pupilless black eyes of the extraterrestrials? Gray aliens, or just the grays, as they're referred to in the biz, they have those large black eyes, and they also have that odd-colored skin, pale and almost bluish, like many of the black-eyed children. The reports of these children who do not have the pale skin are described as having unnaturally colored skin, as if it's been tinted or modified in some way, but not in an organic way. So basically, do these kids know that they don't look like humans, and so they're putting makeup or something on their skin to appear to be more human and more alive? Or do they have this unnaturally colored skin because it's the aliens' way of trying to make them appear more human, but it just doesn't work right? A woman from Wisconsin named Marcia believes without a doubt that she has been abducted by aliens multiple times and that she is the biological mother of more than one alien hybrid child. Marcia said, quote, "When I was 23, the Greys took eggs from me. I somehow knew what they were going to do. During a later abduction, I was shown a small child. It had pale skin and large, solid black eyes. Once again, I knew that this child had come from my genes," end quote. So the gray aliens have always been known to communicate telepathically, and that is how Marcia knew that this was happening, not because they spoke to her in a language she understood, but because they portrayed this to her with their minds. And this sounds a lot like what the black-eyed children do. They speak because, they're hybrids, so they're able to speak, but they don't have a large repertoire, and they don't deviate from their script. The thing that is most compelling about them cannot be seen, and many people feel that they are being hypnotized by these children, lulled into a false sense of security, and slowly convinced to allow a dangerous being inside their car or their homes. Remember that Brian Bethel, at the same time when he was looking at the marquee and realizing that the Mortal Kombat movie had already started and these kids were not going to make it in time, at the same time where he was realizing that logically he also felt his hand moving towards the lock of his car door. So he knows something logically doesn't feel right, but at the same time he can't help himself. Marcia claims that after she was 30, the abductions stopped, but many years later, she was at home when a knock came at a set of French doors at the back of her house, and when she approached the glass doors, she saw a pale boy about 10 years old. He had light, sandy hair just like hers, but he also had pure black eyes. Marcia said, quote, "Right away I felt like I was in some kind of altered state. I just sort of froze. He was standing very close to the glass so I could see his features very well. I felt like he wanted to say something to me, but his mouth didn't move. He just gazed at me through the window. I don't even remember thinking about it, but I unlatched the lock and opened the door. I couldn't break eye contact with him. There was something so intense about him. When I opened the door, I could see that standing a few feet behind him was another boy," end quote. But at that moment, the spell was broken when Marcia's husband came home through the front door, arriving home after work. Marcia looked quickly at the front doors to see who was coming through them, and when she looked back at the French doors, the boys were gone. But she said she felt an incredible joy because she knew she had just seen her son, a son that had been raised by the gray aliens. But does that explain the intense fear that people feel when they come face to face with these black-eyed children? If they are alien hybrids, do they mean us harm? Another theory brings us to China, where they tell stories of demon-like creatures called hungry ghosts, who sometimes do mean human beings harm. A hungry ghost is a very blanket term, and it can refer to many entities throughout many cultures, but they do seem to be the most prevalent in Asia. A hungry ghost can arise when a person dies a violent or unhappy death, or if your ancestors were not properly venerated with the proper rites and prayers. They can return to haunt the living, appearing as emaciated spirits with thin necks during the 7th month of the Chinese lunar calendar. Every year during this time, it is said that the gates of hell open and the hungry ghosts are free to roam, looking for food or drink or anything else that will fulfill their need, although most are never satisfied. Now, a spirit's specific hunger depends on how they lived, their past sins, what they have to atone for. Some of these ghosts can eat, but they can't find food or drink, or if they eat, they just still aren't satisfied. Others can find plenty of food and drink, but their mouths are the size of pinholes, so it's hopeless. They can't even ingest this food. And each year, public celebrations in the form of hungry ghost festivals are held where people put out offerings of rice, cakes, and fruit for these hungry ghosts, hoping to appease them and hoping to remain safe from them. Amulets are worn by the living and incense is burned to protect against those hungry ghosts who cannot be satisfied or who have returned with evil intent. Now, it is possible that those who have encountered black-eyed children are really coming face to face with a hungry spirit, a spirit who is unable to fulfill their hunger or their thirst in the afterlife and is desperate to be invited in so that they might be fed or watered. But to me, there seems to be a far more clear connection between black-eyed children and vampires. People feel that when they are face to face with these children, they are in the presence of a predator. And what is a greater predator than a vampire, somebody or a thing who literally has to drink your blood and take your life so that they can survive? These black-eyed children demand to be let inside, but they can't enter themselves without an invitation. And what they want to do once they are inside is very unclear. Sometimes they have excuses. I think the more evolved ones have figured out just asking to come inside isn't enough. So they have to come up with something. And they're like, what do humans like? They like to eat and watch TV. So a lot of these black-eyed children will say, oh, let me come in. I just want to watch TV. Or let me come in. I'm just hungry. I just want a snack. But some of them don't have any reason or excuse for why they want to come inside. They just continue demanding to come inside. And what happens if they're let inside? Remember earlier I said there's only that one account where a black-eyed child has been invited inside. And in that case, the child was invited inside a vehicle by another child. And that little black-eyed boy didn't have much time to do whatever it was he intended to do before Sharon returned to her SUV and snatched his prey away. But is it possible that in that short time, the black-eyed child fed on Sharon's son, and that may have caused his sickness later on? We see so many accounts of the victims of vampires who are fed on, and maybe they start to transition into vampires themselves, but the transition isn't completed for one reason or the other, and they become very, very ill. Is it possible that this black-eyed child disappeared out of the SUV when Sharon got scared and ran out, but he stayed hidden in the shadows and he waited for Tom to start driving home and caused Tom's accident because of spite? Would there be more accounts of black-eyed children, except for the fact that in those situations, the black-eyed children were let inside, leading to the demise of the only person who would be able to tell the tale? There's no shortages of mysterious deaths and disappearances in this world. Could some of them be attributed to an invitation to come in, an invitation that an adult extended to a seemingly non-threatening child? You don't have to be a Vampire Diaries fan to know that one of the hallmarks of vampirism is the ability to compel a human being to do something against their will. Many people who have been in the presence of these children and lived to tell the tale report feeling foggy-brained and out of it for several days or weeks after, possibly the result of a younger vampire who has not perfected the art of mind control yet. It would explain why these children seem to be old-fashioned and why some of them even continue wearing their old-fashioned clothing. Maybe the black-eyed children who successfully convince people to let them in have been at it for a while, and they figured out, hey, we shouldn't wear old-fashioned clothing. We should wear what modern kids are wearing, like jeans and sweatshirts. Hey, we should try to switch the script up a little bit. We shouldn't just demand to come in. We should say we need a ride to get money from our mom's house so that we can watch a movie. We should think out of the box. At the annual Black-Eyed Children's meeting, maybe they're giving them different scripts and updating their attire. Who knows? But it's interesting to think about. But maybe these black-eyed children have a far sadder backstory, and maybe they are just the spirits of children who have passed away. Now, that seemed to be the general consensus when the spirit of a little girl with jet black eyes terrified residents of Staffordshire in the UK. At the end of September 2014, multiple people claimed to have encountered the black-eyed ghost of a young girl at Connaught Chase, a vast area of countryside where, coincidentally, the bodies of 3 young girls were discovered between 1965 and 1967. After a woman claimed to have seen the black-eyed specter, a man who would go on nightly walks with his dog also came forward saying, quote, "I believe I have seen the black-eyed child on more than one occasion over the last 12 months," end quote. The man explained the first time he encountered this spirit of this girl, he was walking his usual route at night when he heard something rustling in the bushes, but he would usually hear various noises from small animals like squirrels or whatever during his walks, so he ignored it and continued walking. But for the next 10 minutes, the rustling noises continued, and not only that, they followed him. So finally, he turned on the path, finding himself face to face with a young girl who he thought was no older than 10, and she was standing in front of him with her hands covering her eyes. So this man's dog starts going nuts, barking wildly at this girl and straining at the leash. And the man tried to get his dog under control, and he asked the little girl if she was okay, but she didn't respond. Instead, she just stood there, still as a statue, her hands continuing to cover her eyes. Feeling thoroughly spooked, the man continued walking with his dog until, quote, "Suddenly the child appeared again in front of me, this time with her hands down at her sides. I almost fell over when I noticed her eyes were jet black," end quote. Now, the Connaught Chase area is known for its natural beauty and a lot of scenic biking and hiking trails, but it's also infamous for being plagued by supernatural activity. They actually have a haunted inn there. But also, according to Mark Hoover, who's a longtime resident of Claremont County, many believe the little girl with the black eyes that so many people saw is the ghost of Christine Darby, one of the 3 young girls who were abducted and murdered by Raymond Morris in the 1960s. And when I read about this case, I was surprised because it's horrific. So horrific and so sad. I've never heard about it before. We've heard about the Morris murders, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, and this is very similar. It's right up there with how horrific it is, but it's not as well known. Side note, if you have not seen my series on the Morris murders, I will link it in the description box. But this set of kidnapping and murders started with the disappearance of 6-year-old Margaret Reynolds, who vanished on her way to school on September 8, 1965. Within hours, 2,000 people were looking for the young girl, but they found no sign of her. On December 30th, 1965, 5-year-old Diane Tift hugged her brother Terrence goodbye before walking the short distance to her grandmother's house on Chapel Street. But when Diane didn't show up to Grandma's, a search for her proved fruitless as well. Her body would be found just a few weeks later on January 12, 1966, in a ditch underneath the body of Margaret Reynolds. And on August 19, 1967, 7-year-old Christine Ann Darby was playing near her Camden Street home when she vanished, reportedly taken away by a man in a car. 3 days later, her body was found 1 mile from where Margaret and Diane's bodies were recovered. She was naked, and she'd been suffocated. Raymond Morris was later arrested and charged for Christine's murder. He received a life sentence, and after spending 45 years behind bars, he died on March 11, 2014. Just the year before, everyone started seeing this little girl with the black eyes in Connaught Chase. It's speculated that the girl with the black orbs for eyes is Christine, and she spends an eternity wandering because Raymond Morris blindfolded her when she was abducted, and therefore she cannot see. Some believe the black-eyed children are omens of disaster or harbingers of death. They might be changelings or demons from hell. There's dozens of theories about what the origin of this urban legend is, and you can read all about them in David Weatherly's book, Black-Eyed Children. From their descriptions, I personally feel that they are something of a predator. They take the form of children because they think that humans are not threatened by children, and they try to mimic the way that children behave, the way people behave and speak. But because they are not human, it comes off as robotic and awkward, and that is what sets the alarm bells off in people's brains. Now, it's said that the most believable storytellers show, they don't tell. The best actors don't go overboard with the dramatics. They pull you in with subtle facial expressions and subtle changes in speech. They show, they don't tell. But these black-eyed kids, they almost go too hard. They let you know, we're just kids. You can let us in. We won't hurt you. Thinking that these words will be reassuring when in reality they are incredibly off-putting because what kind of small child would feel the need to say those things? If a 7-year-old boy walked up to you and was like, hey, will you let me in? I need a ride. And then you were like, he's like, don't worry, I don't have a gun. Wouldn't you be completely terrified? Because it's just not normal. It's not a normal thing to say. It's almost something that a kidnapper would say to a small child. Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you. Don't worry, I'll get you home in a jiffy. It's very weird. Something in our prehistoric lizard brains tell us that these are not real kids and that there is something to fear. So it's a good practice if you hear a knock on your car window or on your front door in the middle of the night, just let it ride. Don't answer it. There may not be a child with black eyes waiting on the other side of the knock, but there could be, and that's enough for me. But the truth is, anytime you mix children and the horror genre, it's a surefire recipe to creep an audience out thoroughly. This really interesting website I found called hopesandfears.com wrote an article about this phenomenon, and they said, quote, nothing is more potent for fright fans than when innocence is corrupted or lost, and the underdeveloped brain of a child becomes a primal force of evil, blurring the line between victim and monster, end quote. Dee Wallace, who was an actress in the Hills Have Eyes movie, she said, quote, children are innocents, so the more they stray from that, the more frightening it is for all of us. For an innocent energy to be taken over is the gravest of abominations the world can reap upon us. Adults are expected to be corrupt and evil in a way. Children are the last hope for good, end quote. And when I read that, it really did hit me. We do, in a defensive way, learn to not trust adults because they can be nefarious. They do often have cruel intentions and evil motives, and it's mentally exhausting because you can just never let your guard down. But with kids, you can. I know that my favorite way of just unwinding after a long week of looking into the darkest places of humankind is to hang out with my kids. We chalk in the driveway, we color, we play video games, we have fun and laugh. Around my kids and kids in general, I feel safe and happy because they are the purest form of humans. They are what humans would be if they weren't corrupted by money or personal gain or violence. So to have that one last oasis in the desert of depravity threatened, it's a terrifying thought. If you can't depend on children to be good and pure, then there's no hope of goodness and purity anywhere in this world. And that is truly a bone-chilling reality. And then there is the additional fear factor of continuing to view this child, even though they are frightening, as a potential victim, right? Children's brains have not been fully formed. They can be manipulated and corrupted. And if they've gone bad, that must have been what happened. So although you're afraid of them, you also find yourself feeling bad for them. It's like seeing this perfect, flawless rose crushed under a boot. You have to watch something wonderful be destroyed, and you can't do anything about it. That could be why we are so torn when we hear about children committing violent acts like murder. We know murder is wrong, but we also feel, almost against our will at times, empathy and sympathy for the child who committed it. What must have happened to this child? How must this child be feeling now in the wake of this terrible tragedy? They have to live with this now. They're never going to be the same. They can never be innocent again. Even when the child is a perpetrator, many of us still look at them as a victim. And I also wonder if there's something in adults that are a little bit afraid of children already, right? They are younger than us. They are weaker than us. They aren't completely fully developed. They're not super strong. They're not super smart yet, right? We can be superior to them. However, they have the benefit of youth. They can get very strong. They can be very fast. They have like endless energy. And maybe adults are over here thinking, wow, if these kids just wanted to take over Lord of the Flies style, we'd have no chance. With that being said, let me know in the comment section what your favorite scary movie with children is. Mine is The Omen, and I would have said The Sixth Sense, except for the fact that the kid in it wasn't really evil in the movie, even though I still can't look at him today without being scared. He was being plagued by spirits, but some of those spirits were kids, and they were scary. even though at the same time they ended up being victims. But you tell me yours. I can't wait to see what you guys got from me in the comment section. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, share it if you think it's worth sharing, subscribe if you haven't already. Also, don't forget to check out glassesusa.com. I've linked all of my glasses in the description box. You can check them out. Check out any glasses that you're interested in. Don't forget to follow my podcast, Crime Weekly, that I co-host every week with retired police detective and former Big Brother winner Derek Levasseur. We have our podcast anywhere you get your audio podcast, but we also have a YouTube channel where we release our podcast in video forms after it comes out on audio, so you can check those out. Those links are in the description box. And you can also find links in the description box to our coffee company, Criminal Coffee Company, the best coffee company in the world, Black Eyed Kid approved. Thank you so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe, and stay spooky. And I'll see you very soon.